Hey everybody, Sarah Anderson here, Director of Policy at FreedomWorks. I'm joined today by Micah Morrison of Judicial Watch, who's here to talk about a really important issue, and that is mail-in-ballot fraud. Micah works for Judicial Watch, which is a wonderful organization that's done a lot of work on this, as have we, and so I'm really glad to have him on today. Micah, thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be with you.
Before we jump into the topic at hand, please just introduce yourself to our activists and talk a little bit about the work that you do at Judicial Watch.
Sure. My name is Micah Morrison. I'm the Chief Investigative Reporter for Judicial Watch. We are an organization devoted to accountability in government. We deal with political figures across the country. We operate both in court and litigation and with investigative journalism and with investigators who are not journalists, and we sort of put the whole package together. We also often use the Freedom of Information Act. We are the nation's top filer and litigator of Freedom of Information Act requests. On the ballot access issue and ballot fraud issues, we don't use FOIA that much, but it is a tool that we deploy.
That's fantastic to hear. You know, our activists are always concerned about being able to know what the government is doing, and it's often so secretive that it's great that you guys are out there employing the Freedom of Information Act to get that out into the public. You just published a piece which caught my eye a couple of days ago called Mail-in-Ballot Fraud in New Jersey Signals National Trouble. New Jersey is just one of the states that we've seen a lot of issues with mail-in voting. I just did a live stream a couple weeks ago with a gentleman out in Oregon who's seen a lot of issues as well. This is hardly the first case of direct voter fraud. How widespread is this issue and what's going on in New Jersey?
Well, we're very concerned that it's a widespread issue. It certainly appears to be growing. There was earlier a movement on mail-in ballots, which are also more or less absentee ballot. There's a little bit of a technical difference, but during the pandemic, many of the governors have ordered entire mail-in balloting in their states, and there's a lot of opportunities for fraud in that. So investigative journalists and others who've been watching these issues were very concerned about that potential rise in fraud. And indeed, we do see it happening around the country. New Jersey, there's a case we covered. You can find the story online at Judicial Watch. I'm sure, Sarah, you can put up a link at some point. But the Jersey case in Paterson, New Jersey, third biggest city in New Jersey, a municipal budget of $280 million. Two men connected with the city council and two of their assistants were indicted for what appears to be just outright fraud. I mean, they went and allegedly collected blank ballots, forged the signatures in the paperwork, and submitted the fake vote. So that's why many people observe this, say, ballot fraud, you don't have to be a criminal mastermind to do it. It's more like, Curly, Moe, and Larry here. And so it's pretty easy to do, and it does appear to be mounting around the country.
What type of threat does this type of activity cause for elections nationwide? We obviously saw in 2016 people's concern with the legitimacy of elections coming from the other side, but really it seems like this domestic type of threat to election integrity is real, and it's happening at home here by political operatives. What does this mean for our democracy if this type of fraudulent ballot activity continues to go on?
Well, it's a real threat. And of course, the presidential races are ones that get all the attention, and they're very serious. I cited a report in my report. The writer from Real Clear Politics, Mark Hemingway, noted that it only took 80,000 votes in 3 states to swing the election to President Trump. That is not a lot of votes. Bush v. Gore was a couple hundred votes in Florida. So you can take that and you can move it down to every level, from city council races to governors to Senate. Often these races are very close, and if you have some kind of ballot fraud, and there are other kinds in addition to just the straight out ballot fraud. Judicial Watch looks at, we clean up dirty voter rolls. We look at ballot harvesting. There's issues in dirty voter rolls, non-compliance with the National Voter Registration Act. And so if you have tens of thousands, sometimes millions of old registrations on the voter rolls, inactive voters, which are supposed to be taken off the rolls, people can forge their signatures. You can have dead people voting. You can have people voting twice, all those sort of things. So it's a real threat, and people need to get involved and fix this.
The left will come at these type of arguments, especially right now, and say that with COVID-19 going on and the need to social distance, that it just doesn't make sense to have elections in person. But that seems to be a little bit disingenuous to me, since they've been pushing this mail-in voting initiative for years before COVID-19 happened. What is your response to how states can do elections safely without resorting to mass mail-in voting that is subject to a lot of fraud?
Well, first of all, this is as much, this is an issue steeped in partisan bickering, and the left makes a lot of issues about it. But as our president, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, points out, the left is as much a danger from crooked voting as the right. If we look at Patterson, that's a very left-wing city, and there's a lot of corruption there. So it's a corruption threat. Now, how can we have sort of fair elections in a time of pandemic? You can social distance. You can keep the polls open longer. You can take other steps to preserve the right and to insist that people show up at the ballot box. But this is an issue that the left and the Democrats seem to think plays in their favor. I don't really know if that's gonna happen, actually.
Yeah, could definitely easily backfire. What can our activists across the country be on the lookout for if some of this type of stuff is going on in their neighborhoods? What should they be looking out for?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it really gets down to grassroots involvement. One thing I recommend: involved with your local parties, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, Libertarian, Green, whatever. You can do poll watching. You can be involved in what happens at the local level. But for instance, say on ballot fraud, if you live in an apartment building, or if you're somewhere and you see a package of blank ballots show up on your the lobby of your apartment building, which is what happened in Patterson.
Terrifying.
Call the cops, call the Board of Election, call the U.S. Postal Service. This fraud was really apparently one of the ways it was uncovered in Patterson was a postal inspector noticed a huge bundle of votes in a mailbox. Again, not a genius whoever did that.
Mind-boggling.
But so what I would really encourage is you get involved with the process, become aware of ballot fraud issues, and it's really most elections, of course, and most boards of elections are controlled locally. So it's really a great way to get in there and become involved with your local political parties and others, and keep an eye on the ballots.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for what you're doing over at Judicial Watch to keep an eye on this issue. Micah, it's wonderful having you on. Where can our activists find more information about you, about Judicial Watch? You mentioned your president, Tom Fitton. Where can they go to find your stuff?
Well, just Google Judicial Watch. We're at www.judicialwatch.org. We got a very active website, and we're always happy that you can contact us through there. We're always happy to talk to folks, to take tips, to work with other groups. And thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and let's do it again.
Great. Thanks so much for the conversation, Micah, and you take care. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thank you. Take care.
Righty.
Bye-bye.